Morning or good afternoon. This is Fran Olsen Sharp. I work with OU Food Services. Many of you are familiar with who I am. And I'm doing a presentation today for wellness. My subject is on the microbiota and you. So let's get started on that. So when we talk about the microbiome, what is it? Microbiota. Microbiome is actually the DNA sequencing, and I've gotten in the habit of saying that, but it is the microbiota. But what is it? Why is it important? And what influences it? When we look at it, it's a pretty new science, and we've looked at it in many species, not just humans, but it is continually evolving. So we now have research ongoing, and things will change as we learn more. When we look at it, we need to think of ourselves as like a planet. We have all these things living in and on us. It's a community. The microbiota is a community that lives in and on our body. Usually we look at this as being a symbiotic relationship, which means that both those things living in us and on us as both have some benefit. So there are 10 to 100 trillion different microorganisms that live in the form of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and more. And so it can change from birth throughout life all the way to death. Think of our body as a planet, and we support residents. They are residents and visitors. We are a superorganism, which is pretty cool too. The microbiota is so important that the Harvard Chan School of Public Health has gone to calling us our microbiota as a supporting organism because of everything that it can do for us. Digestion, making vitamins, some amino acids, which are building blocks to proteins, breaking down potentially toxic food compounds. There's so many more things, and the more research that we have, the more information we're going to know. We actually know that right now, we are finding that if we get an infant or a newborn's gut microbiota diversity, this can tell us if they're going to have problems with food allergies or not. That's how much science is evolving. This is new stuff. We know that it has an effect on behavioral and emotional, anxiety, depression, and much more. So we can do things that changes the microbiota in and on our body. That's called a dysbiosis. It's a negative change in the microbiota. It's an imbalance. So what we eat, drink, supplements and meds we take, exercise we do or don't do, the stresses we are exposed to, these are just a few things that can result in dysbiosis. It can have a vast effect on our health, massive effect. So here are some of the things that it's important for. When we look at that, boy, that's a lot. So influences, things that can affect what is in our microbiota. Birth is just an example. It's really cool because we actually know now that if a child is born through the birthing canal versus a child is taken through a C-section, there's a huge impact on that child's microbiota. The C-section child does not have the diversity of microbiota that the natural birthing canal child does. That being how we're born is something that we can't change. Pet ownership, that's something we can change, but we know that pet ownership as a child has been shown to increase the diversity of our microbiota as well. Genetics, environment, exercise, again, some of these things we can change and other these things we cannot. Diet, yeah, I'd like to take a little bit more look about that, at that part. We currently have research that shows that diet, what we eat and drink, has been shown to have the most reproducible microbiota shift. So let's talk about this a little bit more, because if it has the most impact on our microbiota and we can control that, we can make some big differences. There's probiotics and there are prebiotics. Probiotics are supplements or food that we eat or take that increase the diversity and number of microorganisms that live in and on our bodies. Prebiotics are supplements or foods that we take or eat to increase the diversity by giving our microbiota the food that it actually likes. And I like to emphasize that this is also known as microbial accessible carbohydrates, because a lot of times people will go away from carbohydrates, but these carbohydrates are very important for our microbiota. So when we look at probiotics, there's a ton out there on the market. Which ones do you need? Are all brands the same? Actually, the answer is not really. And there are specific conditions that need specific probiotics to help. But as a general rule, there are specific situations that can warrant saying that we need to have probiotics. Age is one of these, both ends of the age spectrum. So as we're very, very young, or we are more aged, these two age ends of the spectrum may not have as much diversity in the microbiome. So probiotics might be helpful. During and after antibiotic use or even surgeries, probiotics can be helpful. Specific medical conditions such as Crohn's and more, probiotics may be beneficial. And so in those type of circumstances, we'll recommend a general multi-strain probiotic with yeast, which is also known as Saccharomyces. But for specific conditions like anxiety and depression, they're finding specific microbes that have the most effect. Again, as we learn more, we're going to learn more, period. These are probiotics that are actually foods. Kefir, yogurt with live active cultures, pickled vegetables like kimchi, tempeh, kombucha tea, miso, and sauerkraut. So foods can act both as a probiotic and prebiotic, because even some of these will have some probiotics in them and prebiotics. Generally, we look at all of these as prebiotics. They're coming from what we eat. Inulin, resistant starches, gums, pectins, and fructooligosaccharides. Sorry, I'm having problems with that today. But the biggest thing to me is to understand that in general, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains such as oats, wheat, barley, quinoa, and more all contain prebiotics. So you need to think of, when you think of this, fiber, a variety of foods within each of those groups. But the biggest thing is, like, anytime you increase our fiber intake, we've got to slowly increase that intake so that we can prevent some of the side effects that happen when we increase fiber too much, too quickly. So we look at why raw versus cooked, because when we look at this, these are highest foods that are raw sources. Sometimes when we cook things, the cooking, the temperature denatures the food components. And so whenever that happens, we may be breaking down some of those prebiotics to feed the happy bacteria in our gut. So prebiotics are important because they're fiber components. They have a lot of other benefits as well. But because they're indigestible, the microbiome or the microbiota in our body ferments these in our GI tract, and that results in production of short-chain fatty acids. We abbreviate with SCFA because it's so long. They're very important for many things in the body, such as an energy source, muscle function, and possibly for the prevention of chronic diseases and more. Again, new science, we learn more every day, every week, every month, every year. So this has been a very fast and very to the point presentation on microbiota. But what I'd like to say is live a little on the wild side, increase the diversity of your microbiota with what you can control: sleep, exercise, and diet. And if you want more information on how to do that, we've got wellness access to dietitians for everybody available at OU. So contact us and have a great day. Eat lots of fun foods. Thank you.